Good evening, Des Moines, Iowa, and the world. Welcome
fired up
to the Doc and Lefty program. He's so fired up he won't even let me do my thing. Welcome to the Doc and Lefty program, coming to you live from the Northside Studios, webcast1live.com. Coming to you also on docandlefty.com. This is Lefty, as always. We're bringing you the perspectives you love. From the side you hate, and across the table with me, and his hands inches from my throat. He's eating his Chick-fil-A at the picket line of the Target protest. It's Dr. Bertrosh.
Absolutely.
What is up?
You know, this week it is my IQ and not my weight. That's a change from other years. Lefty starts out the show, comes in, and well, this is what we're going to talk, because we get the show all lined up, and he says, well, we can also talk about the Target protests. And I'm like, because generally I'm a pretty, easygoing guy about, a lot of this stuff. People need to live their lives and everything else. But this Target thing, got me all fired up.
I guess.
And he did it about 10 seconds before the show started, so my head's
well, before we get into that, we should...
We'll talk... Sorry, go ahead.
I want to do a couple minutes on another...
tragedy.
Legend icon who passed away last week on Thursday. Prince. I still don't know. I don't think anybody has released. I didn't look up to see if they've determined a cause of death. There's all kinds of rumors out there. Certainly, when something sudden like this happens, although I guess he'd been ill a couple weeks ago, but then he was better. But then maybe he had an emergency stop in Illinois. But anyway, Prince passed away. I gotta say that it's been fascinating. The outpouring has been pretty, I would say, expected. I haven't been surprised by any of it. Me personally, I'm a little bit. I missed Prince. I missed the first generation of Prince in the 80s, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that if you're going to have two artists who dominated the 80s the same way that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones dominated the 60s, it would be Michael Jackson and Prince, and you could make that comparison however you wanted. Just a guy that he had complete control over his art, had complete control over his image, complete control over how he wanted those two things to be reimagined and refigured and displayed. And it is shocking. He was 57 years old. Man, so I don't know. I like I said, I was more in. There's more cultural resonance for me when he reimagined himself in the late 90s, kind of came back and said, hey, by the way, everybody, I'm this genius. No one can touch me in the late 90s, early 2000s. But certainly for you, Doc, growing up, he was everywhere.
Well, I remember one of the things you got to do when you're a kid is not surf channels, but surf channel. And one of the channels I got to surf was 13, and that had American Bandstand on it. And I remember watching this guy get up there, and he was, I wasn't old enough to drive. It was late 70s, early 80s. And I'm going to tell you, I sat there and watched this guy, and I thought, that isn't really my kind of music. But this guy is a genius, the way he played and everything else. And, and of course, what are you, a teenager? You don't know anything. And it turns out 79 was his first major appearance. It was on American Bandstand, and he just took off. And of course, for my generation, the defining movie is not Top Gun, but Purple Rain.
Purple Rain.
And, I can't tell you three things. One, that is a marvelous campy movie. It is kind of fun to watch. Two, I watched that movie so many times on dates, I can recite the whole thing by memory. And three, remember I got myself in trouble a couple of years ago with the sexiest men in music.
I believe so.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Prince was a sexy guy. He a little itty bitty guy. He had something when he got on stage and in the movies, whatever he was doing, you wanted to watch that. It isn't that you're gay or had those tendencies. It's just like this guy was fun to watch.
Captivating, man.
Yes.
A consummate showman. There was this interview that keeps popping up all over social media of Miles Davis talking about Prince. Miles loved Prince. It was like 1987 or 1986, right before he died. And he said that Prince had this James Brown thing, he had this Marvin Gaye thing, he had this Jimi Hendrix thing, and he had this Charlie Chaplin thing. Now, at that point in his life, Miles Davis is pretty much completely incoherent. And the interview just sort of rambles on. But this is a guy who There was a story somebody told about him, about when he was younger, James Brown calling him up on stage. I think this is probably in the early 80s or maybe the late 70s, and Prince grabbing a guitar and waxing everybody. And it's sort of like the way that Jimi Hendrix did to Eric Clapton back in the late 60s, 68 or 67, 68 when he was in England. Anyway, it is terribly sad. The legally interesting thing is reports coming out today that he left no will and had no estate plan, and he's worth upwards of $300 million, and had complete control of all his recordings, including recordings that have never seen the light of day, that have never been released, that he kept in a vault in his estate in Minneapolis. And boy, you kind of hope that gets taken care of in an expedient sort of way. But when there's lots and lots of money and no will to distribute it, that's when your old cousin Ricky from down the way that you haven't seen in 25 years comes calling. So I hope that that the family is able to take care of this, and we certainly do join in the nostalgia and some of the memories that people have been talking about. So so I just wanted to talk about that at the top. We should also maybe quickly recap all that's been digested now. The big wins for Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton last week in New York. Donald Trump just killed everybody.
Yeah. Well, hang on a second.
Oh,
here.
Go ahead.
Maddie just popped up and she said, rats, I just lost it. Anyway, she said it's like watching Freddie Mercury. Prince was a lot like Freddie Mercury as far as his passion, his ability to perform. Unlike Freddie Mercury, I think Prince did more for the sexual revolution in the 80s for men than anybody else I can think of. So.
Well, actually, I certainly would say that Freddie Mercury, David Bowie, and Prince and all those guys were certainly contributing to a lot of the...
Oh, but you've listened to Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bowie and Freddie Mercury weren't overtly sensual.
No.
Like
well, they didn't. They certainly didn't
use the word sensual because if you listen to his songs, you're like, holy cow.
Yeah, they weren't nearly. I mean, Queen was certainly more, or was not quite as overt, a little more clever. Prince was definitely explicit. At least that first half of his career, he converted to Jehovah. Well, I think he always was a Jehovah's Witness, but he started taking his religion more seriously in the '90s and gave up all the cursing and the sex talk. But definitely in the '80s, there was he got in trouble with Tipper Gore and Susan Baker.
Oh yeah, everybody got in trouble with Tipper.
They did.
And there's Dee Snider taking her to task, and I'm like, that's pretty sad. You're letting a rock star who's filed his teeth kick your butt.
And hey, 30 years old, and Dee Snider went into Congress and lit it up.
My brother Joe's opinion is that compared to Michael Jackson, Prince's crap, I'm going to tell you,
it's two sides.
Great artists. They were two different ways.
It's two sides of the same coin.
Yep.
Michael Jackson certainly was fantastic, but he was not the producer, the engineer, played every instrument and sang on all of his records like Prince did. I mean,
that's true.
And so they were both great in their own way, and I would say they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Anyway, well, Joe's complaining that we're not saying what he wants us to say. So let's move on.
Sure.
To
socialism for everybody. Socialism now.
For everybody. we can all agree, the more free stuff I get from guys like Blake, the happier I'll be.
That's right. And the less incentive I have to give you that stuff, is the happier I'll be.
Oh my God, we did another role reversal.
We made it.
We reversed roles. I am now taking money from you.
And I don't want to work to do it. We figured it out. That's how socialism works. But like I said,
people sit around and hope somebody else pays them.
It worked. It worked in Animal Farm until it didn't.
Yeah.
Until it didn't, it worked just fine.
Well, because they had one horse that did all the lifting.
So stop
and then
it.
when he died, it was over.
Well, okay. So last week,
we're actually up to commercial break.
Oh, well, then let's do that.
So thanks everybody for doing it again. We want to thank all of our sponsors, Des Moines Anesthesia at 515-574-6442. They do anesthesia as well as pain management. They have offices here in Des Moines and in Fort Dodge, Halo Capital. Lebanus Law Firm, Bertrosian Associates, we want to thank you for tuning in. Without you, we couldn't do what we do. We'll be right back.